I'm Jessica Rector. Welcome to Jessica. What would you do? You're married, you just had a baby, life is great. 5 years later, you're going through a divorce. You're used to seeing your child every single day, and now custody goes to the mother, and you're the father. What would you do, or what wouldn't you do to see your child? Please welcome my guest, Jeff Cazell, who has been through this before and is still going through it. First, before we get started, Jeff, I would like to say thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
It means a lot to me that you came on and your willingness to talk about it, because I feel that society puts a lot of pressure on men to not open up about their emotions and feelings, and especially about something so sensitive, and so I appreciate your willingness and your candor to talk about this. So let's begin by telling us a little bit about your situation, how it happened, and where you are 10 years later.
Okay. Well, as you said, I was married. We were married for 5 years. My ex-spouse and I were married for 5 years, and then we were blessed enough to have our son. And 3 years later, unfortunate circumstances, we parted ways, and we went through a separation and a divorce. This was in the mid-'80s, and unknown to me, where I've heard of divorces that have been very ugly and very combative. I thought, at least if we're going to separate and divorce, that let's make this a nice, or as pleasant as possible, with shared custody and visitation. And so when we went to court, I was very shocked, and it was unfortunate that the court system at that time viewed the mother as getting custody, and the mother will get alimony, and the mother will get child support. The father is awarded every other weekend visitation, starting from Friday night until Sunday evening, and that was it. I was absolutely stunned that this had happened to me. I tried to get used to that. I tried my ex-spouse was very, very angry, as you can imagine. I was the one that walked away from the marriage. Right. She was very angry and very vindictive, and there were times during a 1 or 2 year period where our son was a pawn in custody, in child support issues. The courts had awarded a certain amount, and it's really just a simple formula that a judge says, here is the amount that the father will pay for child support. It doesn't really take into account the father's financial situation, the father's other obligations. Financial obligations are irrelevant, or were irrelevant in the court's eyes at that time, so regardless of the financial hardship, you are obligated to pay child support, which I have no problem doing. I understood that, and of course I would always want to pay child support to support my son, regardless of if he's living with me or with his mother, or if we were still together. She had decided that, she's originally from Canada, decided 2 or 3 years later that she wanted to go back home.
With your child? With
Christopher, our son. I had to sign a paper basically allowing her to go back to Canada, to a different country, which was very, very difficult. I had to do some serious soul searching, knowing that now it wouldn't just be 5 or 10 mile distance apart and every other weekend. It would be 2,000 miles away. And how was I going to see my son? When would I see my son?
What would you have done, or what would have happened if you said, no, I don't want you to go, and you wouldn't have signed the paper to go to Canada?
We probably would have ended up in court. I think she would have fought that. There would have been a court case where she would present to a judge, here are the reasons I would like to go back. I'm a Canadian citizen. My family is there. She may have said it's in the best interest of the child to go to Canada. Just my opinion, I don't think she would have won. But at that time, the manipulation and the hurt and the heartache that I was experiencing, I think that I just felt that I would allow that to happen, that I would sort of give in to her wishes, because I wanted to be a nice guy. And I knew that I was making good money, and I guess I thought, I'll be able to hop on a plane and go see Christopher.
And go see him. And did that happen?
It didn't happen, no. I tried to do it, of course. Life takes over, the bills take over, other obligations. And I was only able to afford occasionally to fly up there. When I did go up there, it was very, very difficult to see my son.
And why is that?
My ex-spouse, I believe she viewed it as a threat. Here was Jeff coming back into her life, into Christopher's life, and she was still angry over the divorce. And there was, again, manipulation. I would show up to visit him, and he wouldn't be there. He wouldn't be home. She would have gone somewhere.
And you came all the way to Canada to see him, and he wouldn't be there.
Exactly, yes. This has happened 2 or 3 times in the past 5 or 6 years. I have come back to California and thought, okay, well, what can I do to stay in contact with my son?
Right.
I can call, but again, there was no guarantee that I would get through. I would leave messages. She may answer the phone and say, well, he's not available, or he's at school, or he's outside with friends. I'll have him call you back. In the 9 years that they've been up in Canada, I've received 1 telephone call from my son. I decided, well, maybe the best or another alternative would be to write letters, send postcards every now and then, which I try to do once or twice a week. I'll write him a quick postcard and say, hey, how you doing? You know, or write him a long letter with pictures and things that I've been doing, or activities that I've been doing, just to try. And I hope that I think he gets them, because I've had other telephone contact with him, and he said, yes, I got your letter, or yes, I got the CD you sent me, thanks a lot, sort of thing.
So you're reaching him in some way.
Yes.
So did you decide to go to court? What did you decide to do, since you go up there and you wouldn't be able to see him because you still had every other weekend visitations at this time?
It was still in place, and that order applies to Canada as well. I had registered it in California and in Canada, and again, I was told, well, that's really unrealistic. What are the chances that you're going to be able to visit Christopher on the weekend, or visit him on his birthday, or visit him on Father's Day? It was completely unworkable. I did go back to court, and I actually met with my ex-spouse and tried to, make a deal with her, saying, could we amend the child support, because I had fallen into financial difficulty. And I said, it doesn't make sense for you to garnish my wages or to go to court when I have nothing to give. And you know that from past experience, I'm more than willing to pay child support.
Right.
And it's an unfortunate trap that I was caught in, and that a lot of men get caught in, is that the system, rightfully so, works for mothers and for fathers that are obligated to pay child support, but it, again, doesn't take into consideration that there are other obligations or there are other issues in a father's life that may make it very difficult to pay that child support.
Well, and that's also, I think, where the term deadbeat dad comes in.
Exactly.
And they tend to give the good dads, like yourself, they tend to give you guys a bad rap because for whatever reason, they don't want to pay child support, or they're not paying child support, and you see signs up saying, hey, this person is wanted because they owe 5 years of child support, and so they give everyone else a bad name. And so I think a lot of people out there, hopefully watching, don't know that there are people like you, there are men like you who are willing to pay child support and who want to spend time with their children, and they'll go through all these things just to see their son or daughter. They'll go up to Canada to be told, no, sorry, he's busy. You're making that effort, and you've been making that effort for, what, 10 years now? And, how do you keep hope alive after 10 years, though?
Well, just to backtrack a little bit, number one, I thought you had, and it was told, you have to go through the court system.
Right.
Anytime you have to amend something, or would like to amend a visitation, or like to amend a custody child support issue, you have to spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to have an attorney submit these things to the court in the hopes that a judge will feel that they're reasonable, that this is a reasonable request on the father's part.
So what do you do if you don't have that kind of money? Because a lot of people don't have that kind of money.
Then you can't do it. You're powerless. You're really powerless to do anything except, and this is difficult for a lot of men, to sit down with your ex-wife, which I attempted to do and was partly successful, sit down and negotiate, really negotiate support and negotiate visitation of your child, not their child, your child.
Right. But if your spouse is angry and she holds your child, she has custody, holds your child, I mean, she could very easily use your child as a pawn and say, well, no, you're not going to see him. Right. I mean, so how do you prevent that from happening? You
can't prevent it from happening, and it happens. And I understand now, after 10 long years, why I've tried to put myself in my ex-spouse's spot and say, yeah, I guess on the human level, and when you're angry, when you're upset, and emotions take over, and they take over for men as well. It's just that men aren't as well equipped to let those emotions out, that I can see how a woman would say, well, if you're not going to pay me support, you're not going to see your child. And that's against the law. That child support and visitation are two separate issues, but it's an unfortunate game that both men and women play. They really do. The deadbeat dads are in the press, they're on the news, they're in the papers, and I understand that, but truthfully, they are a minority. I've read studies and books that show that it's about 80% of fathers are paying some, if not all, of their court-ordered child support. So as you mentioned, there's a fringe group. It is 20%, and some people may say, well, 20%, that's a lot of men. But
not compared to 80%.
But there's 80% that are making that effort. There's 20% of men, and you're right, they're dragging us down because they are deadbeats, and they're not supporting, for whatever reason, they're not sending money to their child, really, because that money is for your child, for education, for clothing, for food, to help the mother pay for housing.
But it's also, you have 20% of bad people outweighing the 80% of good people. Because you don't hear about all this 80% of good people, good dads out there who want to be involved. You just hear all the negative stuff.
Right. And that 20%, you're right, the focus is on them. The focus, and not in their defense, but a lot of that 20% of the men are financially burdened already. It could be financial burden with bills, possibly a new family, other children that they have to support. A lot of them are low to low middle income earners.
Yeah, so we just don't know.
It can be very, very difficult to make that child support payment. You have to make that child support payment, but it can be difficult, and a lot of people don't understand the difficulties. I know that everybody today knows that everyone is financially challenged.
Yeah.
So imagine having, by your choice, having two families to support, or a child from a previous marriage. You have to try to do it, but the games that are played, it's like this continued anger wells up day after day, month after month, sometimes year after year.
Right.
And men, I've tried to figure it out. I've tried to figure out the best way to approach this issue, because I know it's something that I have to live with. Approach my ex-spouse in different ways, through anger, which doesn't work. Through manipulation, which doesn't work, through threats, which will get you in trouble. So it's not worth it. There has to be a way where, even though and some people say, well, you couldn't get along while you were married, how do you expect that you're going to get along when you're divorced? But it's a huge challenge, and you have to try. You have to.
Well, I have to commend you, because you said a few minutes ago how you were able to kind of get outside of yourself and look at it from her point of view. And I don't think a lot of men, or people in general, I don't think do that in the situations they're in. So how are you able to do that?
A lot of practice, I guess. I tried to sit down with other men and discuss how they were feeling. A lot of men go through the same hurts. They love their children. The divorce was something between the parents, but there's still that child or those children involved. And men sometimes don't know how to cope with those feelings, and they don't know how to deal with those feelings. And I think the defense mechanism is just to be angry, to lash out at the court system, to lash out at judges, to lash out at attorneys and their ex-spouses, in some way to feel like that's going to get them somewhere, and it really doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't do anything except build up this resentment and this hurt. And And again, the children are the ones that get hurt the most, because they know what's going on. They know that mom's upset. They know that dad's upset. My son in the past has wondered why he didn't get to see dad on the weekend. Last summer I was just up in Canada, and I told him I was going to see him on a certain day, and I went to pick him up, and again, unfortunately, he was not there. His mother and her new husband had decided that they were going to go away. Well, how do I, as a father, number one, find out where my son is when it's my right to see him on that day during visitation? How do I explain that to him? How do I help him to understand that dad was there? I was there for you. I traveled a long way to see you. In my case, sometimes maybe it's just around the block. Other times it could be hundreds or thousands of miles.
But dad is still taking time out, even if you're just around the block. Dad's still taking time out of his schedule to see you. So the distance, you know, the distance isn't as important sometimes, you know, but it makes that big of a difference when you are going afar away from home, and you took more time out of your schedule, rearranged your schedule to see him. Does he think that it's you, or does he know that it's his mother's doing?
I think now that he's older, he's 15 years older, that he must realize, because obviously with a 15-year-old you can hold an intelligent conversation with, and if I've never had him say, well, why didn't you show up, or why didn't you come? And I've again tried to explain to him through letters or through telephone calls, you know, I was there, or I thought we were going to do this. And I bite my tongue when these things happen, because I know I don't want to end my sentence with, but your mom did this, but your mom said no, but your mom was the one that took you out of town. So
how do you make yourself not look bad and not make your ex-spouse not look bad too? I mean, because as a child, I would think that someone is to blame for it. You know, you're trying to find, okay, if it didn't work, someone's at fault. So how do you say, okay, I'm not at fault and your mom's not at fault, when you know that the mom is? I mean, how do you convey that without being negative against the mother?
You know, honestly, I don't know. I really don't know. All I know is that I really think that you should try your best not to badmouth your child's mother or your child's father. It only hurts the child.
Right.
And it doesn't matter. I could tell my son stories about what his mother has done or what she said, but to what end, though? So that he'll hate his mother? I don't want my son to hate his mother.
Right.
I mean, and I certainly don't want him to feel like I've abandoned him or I don't want to see him.
So how do you keep the balance, though? Okay, so you're not bad-mouthing the mother, but how do you convey, besides saying, okay, I was there, I came all the way up there to pick you up? I mean, what else do you say? I mean, do you say, but you weren't there? I mean, how do you convey what you're trying to convey without verbalizing it in a negative way?
Well, that's the difficult part, and I have talked with men for years that do just that. They badmouth the mother. They say, well, it wasn't my fault. I mean, there's men's groups where I've sat in and listened to them, and they are so angry. And I think, if anything, a men's group is the best thing to do, because men can sit around a table and just vent and say things that they really want to say to their ex-spouses, but they know that they shouldn't and they can't. Most men, in my opinion, would not badmouth the mother, because they still understand that's the child's mother. But it is very, very difficult sometimes. But you have to try. You have to continue the course that you know that someday you're going to see your child. It might not be tomorrow. It might not be this weekend. It might not be for a month. And that's sad that those things happen. And I've experienced them personally. I haven't seen my son in months and months and months. And there are some days where I even hesitate to make that telephone call, because I don't want to hear her voice. I don't want her to pick up the phone and have me ask if I can speak to my son and have her say he's not available. he's not around. He's doing his homework. And then have to, again, bite my tongue and slowly hang up the phone because I don't want to slam it down on her ear.
Right.
And say, okay, I'll try again tomorrow. Maybe he'll pick up the phone next time.
But after 10 years of hearing that over and over and over again, how do you somehow muddle through and say, okay, I mean, yes, it's your son. You want to see him. But how do you get the energy to pick up and say, God, please don't let her answer the phone? Right. I just think it would be hard. I mean, I don't have children, but to put myself in that situation to say, okay, the most she can say is no, I guess. The most she can say is no, you can't talk to him. But I just think nobody wants to be rejected. Nobody wants to hear no.
Exactly. Especially men.
Well, I'm a woman, and I don't want to hear no either. But I just think that's so hard, especially from someone that you used to be close to, for them to say, no, you can't speak to your child. And like you said, you have a right. You're his father. But that has got to be like one of the hardest rejections of all, you know?
It is, and I'm not saying that mine is a typical case.
Right.
Where the mother is refusing visitation or is playing games. But I know it happens often. All I know is that you can't. That I personally had said to myself, I can't give up. There has to be a way, or there will come a day where I will see my son. I cherish the moments that I talk to him on the phone. I talk to my family who live in the same city, and they say, I delivered the letter, or I delivered the package. It's in Christopher's hands.
So someone you trust is getting it to him.
Yes.
So you know.
I mean, there's roundabout ways to stay in contact with your children. I've just tried to figure out what other ways I can because of the distance.
Right. And it's amazing because I'm sure your mind would never go there. You know, if you're not in that situation, you would never think, oh, well, maybe I'll have to revert to this. So maybe I'll have to go through a relative to get the letter or the package to him, and then maybe I need to call him when he's over at my relative's house. And it's like then your mind kind of starts thinking deviously, like how can we get around the system in order just to have one phone conversation, which is your right anyway.
Right. Well, yeah, and almost deviously, but it creatively. Think creatively.
You know, thank you. That's a more positive.
But I mean devious, and try to avoid. I'm not avoiding contact with my ex-spouse. I just want to avoid conflict.
Right.
And I think that's really priority number one, is to have contact with my son, either through written or through emails or through telephone, or when I can to go up and see him where he lives.
But I also think that whenever he does talk to you, he knows that you still want to talk to him. And I think that's really important, that you do have hope and that you are continually trying to make some kind of contact with him, and that he knows that you're still there. And yes, I'm still going to call you, and I'm trying to see you. Things may get in the way, things may come up, but I'm still your father, and I still love you, and I'm still trying, as opposed to him never hearing from you, or he doesn't know that you're trying. I think as a child that would be a lot more comforting, you know, even getting just a few minutes, you know, on the phone or whatnot.
Exactly. I think that divorce itself is hard.
Right.
It's hard on everybody. No one can imagine, unless you've gone through a divorce. There's no such thing as a good divorce, even though we try to make it happen. It's a separation. It's a falling apart of the family.
Right.
And the most impact it has is on the children.
Right.
And you cannot just give up on that relationship. And unfortunately, even today, women will usually get custody. And men will have to understand that, and they'll have to accept that. I don't see it changing dramatically. But you can't give up on the relationship that you have with your child. If it's not going to be day-to-day, and you don't get to tuck them in, and you don't get to read the books, find something else to do. Find some way to stay in contact with your child, regardless if they're up the street or if they're in a different country. And again, it might be weeks, it might be months, but you have to let that child know that you're their parent and you'll never give up on them, you'll never forget about them, that you're interested in what they're doing.
Right.
Even if there's other issues that come up, and there'll be stepdads. I had to deal with that too. I had to hear my son call another man dad.
That's hard.
It was very difficult the first or second or third or 10th time I heard it. But I had to step back and say, okay, she remarried.
Right.
I guess he's going to call him dad, but he still calls me dad.
Right.
I'm his father. That'll never change. And
well, I think, you know, it's kind of similar to a dream. You know, you have to keep that hope alive. Just like if you're really, really pursuing a dream, you have to keep muddling through. If you fall down, you have to get back up if you really want it. And it's kind of similar to really wanting to see or speak to your child. It's like, you know, if you fall down once, you still have to get back up. You still have to pick up that phone and dial the number. You still have to send letters. You still have to find some way to keep in contact with this person, because your child is your dream, you know, and to not have him in your life in any aspect, even if it is only a phone call, would just be detrimental to you and to him. So at least you're finding ways to get through to him as much as possible. So what message do you want to send out there to everyone who's watching, the dads who may be going through this, maybe listening, maybe saying, you know, I felt that same thing, I'm going through that right now, or to the mothers, or to people out there who don't even know that something like this exists?
Well, I think my number one message would be, regardless of what point you're at, if you've just separated, or if it's a new divorce and it's been a month, or it's been a year, or it's been 10 years or 11 years, as in my case, you're going to have to go through the grief and the anger can be intense and it can be ugly, but if you can just take a step back and realize that you still have these children,
right,
or a child that's involved in this whole mess that you think will never be resolved, and remember that there's got to be a way where everyone can at least try, at least make the effort and try, for the children's sake, to get along, to be
right,
civil to each other. And I'm not sitting here preaching and saying this is easy, you've just
right,
got to try and be nice to someone that you at any given moment might just absolutely hate and want to have nothing to do with. But again, make the call,
right,
even if it is someone you don't want to talk to.
Right.
Bite your tongue and just say, I would like to speak with my child, or write a letter,
right,
or an email, or make the visit. Don't get so uptight and so angry and so upset that you give up and that you just say it's not worth it. Right. Because you know what? When your child was born, it was the most important event of your life, and just remember that. And look at your child's pictures, right, when they were a baby, and just remember
that it's worth it.
That it's worth it.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah. And thanks to all of you for watching, and I hope Jeff's story influences some of you to open your minds a little bit more and see things from a good father's point of view, and to know that there is someone that may be going through the same thing as you. We'll see you next time on Jessica.